How's it going, guys? My name is Reece and this is my brand new FZ1N by Yamaha. I got this bike fairly cheap, and by fairly cheap I mean really cheap. So we're going to try and do some servicing to see if we can get it back to its former glory, or we're going to find out if we're going to have to chuck it in the bin. Now, on my test ride and my ride back home, the bike ran actually pretty well. The only physical damage that I could actually tell was from a low side impact the previous owner had. And judging from that, I'm assuming that either the overflow bottle ended up leaking coolant, or overall there's a leak in the coolant system. From what I've been told, this bike really hasn't been serviced that much, having the same old oil, coolant and brake fluid for the past 2 years. My first suspect to the overheating issue is going to be the radiator fans. The left hand side works freely, but I presume from the low side incident the previous owner had, that the cable was actually intruding on this fan ever so slightly, preventing it from moving freely. The bike only does have just coming up to 15,000 kilometers, which is not that much, but I think it's still a good idea to give it all fresh fluids and give it some new life. First, we're going to start by draining the oil. Next, we're going to have to take off our oil filter. Then we're going to grab our new filter and put some old oil just around the rubber lip of the new filter. Then we put that bad boy on and tighten it hand tight. Then we're going to have to put the sump plug back in and tighten it up. Now once everything's done up nice and tight, we're going to fill up the bike with the specified oil that it requires. Every bike is different for how much oil it will require. For this bike, we know it's 3.1 litres, so we're going to try and fill up that exact amount. Now it's good every litre or so just to double check your sight glass or dipstick to make sure that you're getting the right amount of oil. You're going to want to keep the bike upright to make sure that the sight glass or dipstick is giving you the most accurate reading. With the oil all topped up, now we're going to turn on the bike just for a couple of seconds and make sure nothing's leaking. So, no leaks. Now we're going to go to the coolant flush. Now you're going to want to make sure that your motorcycle isn't hot for this step, just in case you burn yourself with hot coolant. You're going to want to locate wherever the bleed nipple is for your radiator or cooling system is, and you're going to want to open that up. For the FZ1, it's this bolt right here. Now that the fluid is flowing out, we're going to open the radiator cap just to help give it a little bit more flow. Generally that's located on either the left or right side of your radiator. For the FZ1, it's on the right hand side. Now we've put the drain bolt back in, we're going to fill the radiator with some distilled water until it hits the full mark. We're going to run it with the distilled water for a few minutes, just until it gets a bit warm. Then after that, we're going to repeat the process and drain it. Now that I've personally gone through the process twice, I'm going to fill up the radiator with pre-mixed green coolant. Now that we've filled up the radiator with coolant and put the radiator cap back on, we're going to fill our reservoir. Now the bike has new coolant, new oil and a new oil filter, we're going to focus on the last step, making sure that we can get that fan moving freely again. So after bending this bracket back, which was probably pushed in during the low side, I've now given the fan free play. Now we're going to let the bike idle so it can hit operating temperatures, and we're going to see if both fans actually still operate. So after letting it idle for a bit, we can find out that still this fan is not working. So our next step is to check the fuses. Now I don't want to be too certain, but when it was running only on one fan at the lights and whilst it was idling here, the temperature would still go up all the way up to 100 degrees. Doing our test right now, the temperatures managed to hit 100 degrees, kick both fans on, and the temperatures dropped right down to 90 in only a matter of a couple of seconds. So we're going to grab our helmet, put our gear on and go take it for a ride to see if it heats up anymore. Okay, now we're on the road. We're going to be testing to see if this bad boy overheats. So far we're at a really nice 76 degrees, which is pretty fantastic. Like I said at the start of the video, the bike didn't overheat until I got towards the end of my trip. So this is the first time I've actually managed to stop in a bit of traffic for a minute or so. It did hit 100 degrees. The temperature is going down. It was 101. Both fans are kicking on, and now the temperature is dropping from 101, 99, 98, 97 and so on. So it looks like so far it's not overheating. And ride done. And testing done. Now I want to believe that the bike is now fixed. From the testing, the highest temperature the bike ever managed to get up to was 106 degrees, and that was just as soon as I parked up home. Even though it said 106 degrees, the fans kicked in at 100 degrees and managed to pull the temperatures down. Whilst on the highway, I believe I only got up to around 93 degrees. And while stationary, the highest I managed in traffic was 101 degrees. Every single time I hit the 100 degree mark, both fans managed to kick in and put the temps back down to 90 degrees. So, knock on wood, I think this is a great purchase. Despite the physical damage from the previous owner's low side, I think this bike is going to hold great value as long as it stays together. Overall, there's a fair amount of modifications, and being at 14,000 kilometers, that's pretty new. So for everything spent besides the bike, we're at $180. That's for coolant, distilled water, an oil filter, and oil. The other thing that you might be wondering is the price of the bike. And fortunately, I can say I got this for $1,000 Australian. Now, I do own another bike as well, which is this 2008 CBR 1000RR. And don't get me wrong, I really love this bike. The way it handles and the power delivery, it is such a great bike. But unfortunately, sometimes you need to prioritize things in life. And since I was so lucky to manage to pick up this thing for so cheap, I'll most likely be selling the Fireblade and sticking to the FZ1 for now. Hopefully time proves itself, and this bike stays as reliable as it should. And considering how cheap it was, I've got a bit more money for leeway for a few more modifications. So I look forward to making more videos about this bike, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. See you on the next one.